Yeah, this card is great. Like, you get to cast it on 3, and then like if you get to untap, we've talked about all these 1-mana cyclers in blue and white. You really get to do some crazy things where you don't have to cast spells anymore. Like, that's the weirdest thing. Like, you can build a deck where once you resolve this, you don't even have to interact with your opponent anymore. You're just like, oh, all right, I'm just gonna make 2/2 Drakes. Can you beat them? And there's a lot of decks that can't. And there's a lot of redundancy. Like, okay, I'll Sweltering Suns, I'll Radiant Flames, I'll Fumigate. Okay, I'll cycle more cards. And there's an inevitability that comes with this card that I think is really disgusting. Not to mention the fact that the way they're worded now, it also includes just discarding a card, which opens up a whole nother set of interactions.
Yeah, there's a pretty much a decent discard sub theme throughout the entire Shadows of Innistrad block.
Shout out to Haunted Dead.
Yeah,
what up, Bay?
And those sorts of cards Madness plays very, very well when you're working with these kind of synergies with Drakehaven. So I mean, like you can put the pieces together. Why they may have added this discard a card rider to a lot of these payoff cards, like Curator of Mysteries, like Drakehaven, like the card in black that also exists. So it's important because they now play well with each other.
Yes, yeah. Before they didn't. And now they do. And I mean, so we're talking about some of those cards, like something like Call the Bloodline, which is close, right? Well, Call the Bloodline with this now says, like, pay a mana, or pay 2 mana, get a Drake, and a Vampire. So the Haunted Dead, like, especially if you're playing with, like, prized amalgams, like, you can, like, oh, I'll, at turn 3 of this, the next turn play my 4th mana, you don't have to do whatever you did in turn 1 or 2 to discard a Haunted Dead, then you're like, okay, cool, pay 2 mana, discard hopefully some amalgams, trigger two triggers off of my Drakehaven, pay for those, and then I have 2 Drakes, a Spirit Token, a Haunted Dead, and X amalgams. My turn? Because that was at the end of your turn.
Well, that was that.
It's your second main phase.
Your second main phase, yeah.
But like,
get used to knowing when that ends. BT dubs.
So there's a lot of cool ways to interact with this, and I personally, like I said, this is my favorite card in this set. I will more than likely be casting these week 1.
Guaranteed. Probably most other weeks afterwards, right?
Well, yeah, we have this like week 1. We have this the Comic Town Classic. That's probably what I'll be casting there. So, what shell that's in, I'm not sure yet, but the pieces are there, and I'm excited
for sure. All right. Next we have, I assume, Essence Scatter. I assume we're talking about that sweet reprint.
I'm getting all the reprints. Essence Scatter. For those of you who don't know, it's a generic and a blue instant counter target creature spell. That's it. I think it's a card that
simple, plain and easy.
Yeah, I mean, it's not the greatest card in the world, but I think it's something that Standard has needed for a while.
It's been missed.
Yeah. Oddly enough, the current format's probably not the best for it.
No.
But the fact that it's in the format is nice.
It's important.
We've said, I mean, a lot of times in the past when discussing, what's wrong with Standard, why are these same decks dominating all the time? I think it's because lack of answers. I mean, that's a consistent thing that's come up. And I think this set, Essence Scatter is one of those just clean answer cards that really should be in every Standard format.
Yeah, it feels
just like Negate.
Like, look how long we went without a card like this, and like had outside of 3 mana, counter spells or bad removal spells. Like, you looked at a Gear Hulk and went, all right, well, that's cool. You know what I mean? Like, you got to give decks a way to interact.
So I think this set really did a great job of printing like good answers. We talked about the Cycling Disenchant. We have Cast Out. We have Essence Scatter. We have some more that we haven't even gotten to yet. So I think it's definitely gonna, even if it's not overtaking Standard with super powerful cards, I think just the fact that you have more interaction against certain decks is gonna go a long way to making this set very relevant.
Absolutely.
All right. I'm kind of glad this one made it on there because I've had it cast against me in some of the testing that we've done. It's Gail Strike.
Yeah, Gail Strike is 2 generic and a blue for an instant. Return target tapped creature to its owner's hand, draw a card. This card reads a lot like Repulse. If you remember, if you know what that card was, it was an instant. It just didn't have the tapped rider. You could just bounce a creature and you drew a card. We had a card that was really close to that in Eldritch Moon.
Mm-hmm.
It was a common. It was like something undercurrents or something like that, but it was a sorcery speed, and that card was great in that format. Just so you know, this card being an instant is really really good because it gets to gain some tempo if they attack. It replaces itself as a card. And I think that's, again, if we're talking about building blue control, like this is the kind of card that's pretty exciting, and it's also pretty exciting with Gear Hulks, like to be quite honest. And again, bouncing a tapped creature means once again, if they take up their Gideon, you can bounce that Gideon too. And I think this when I looked at this, I was like, oh man, that's Repulse, and I think it's close enough that it's good.
I believe it. Always watching makes this card a little bit awkward.
That is definitely true.
But other than that. Yes, I do believe that this card has sort of a getcha value to it, at least initially, and I think a lot of people will play into this and play hard into it and get blown out. Just because I think a lot of people, let's be fair, a lot of people haven't played against Repulse, in their standard, games of Magic or anything like that.
When was outside of like Reflector Mage? When was the last like bounce spell that saw consistent play?
I mean, you had. Like Dispossess, he play with the one tournament that
I think like Vapor Stag is like
Vapor Stag.
Like, maybe that was the last because that's when they really stopped printing on summons after that. Like, I was like, all right, so yeah,
just keep an eye out on it. Eye out for it, not on it. Don't put your eyes on it.
Yeah, don't do that.
Take your eyes out.
I think we should talk about Glyph Keeper.
Okay.
It's not on the list.
Sell us on it.
I'm not going to sell you on it. I just don't. I think it's a playable card. So Glyph Keeper is 3 generic blue for a 5/3 Flying Sphinx. Has the text: whenever Glyph Keeper becomes the target of a spell or ability for the first time each turn, counter that spell or ability. And it has Embalm of 5 generic blue. So it has kind of the Kira Great Last Spinner ability. I don't think this card is like super amazing or anything, but it's difficult to get off the board, and even if you do get off the board, it can come back with the Embalm. So, I think blue. I think Gear Hulk's definitely a better finisher for blue, but this might be even a sideboard card potentially against like maybe some removal light decks that really aren't going to be able to get this off the table very easily.
I think 3 toughness is why I just didn't care about this card at all. Like 5 mana for the 5/3 is not something I want to be doing most of the time.
I'll agree with that, but I mean it is a 2-for-1 every time for them to get it off the board.
Unless they can just like attack it through it and not care.
Right.
Like that's my issue. Maybe
I think it's more of a sideboard card.
Sure. I mean it's possible. Maybe I'm not giving enough credit. Like I said, maybe in like control mirrors, like landing this does feel pretty good. But
even if you don't land it, you just like, got countered. Okay, I'll bomb it.
Yeah.
And it's like.
And maybe that's true. I don't know. I guess I think other cards I've seen play. Maybe that's true, but it just I don't know. I see I have 3 toughness, and it's just like man, that's not exciting.
I wasn't high on this card when I first saw it, but I think if you look at it a little differently, I think like coming out of I think it's gonna be way better out of the sideboard than it is as a main deck card. So
okay, yeah, I could see that.
Yeah, because I mean definitely like against attacking decks, it's not gonna be very good. It's not like a great blocker. I mean I guess it can take out something, but if you're just trading with like their 2 mana creature or whatever, it's not going to feel good.
I wonder if my only thought would be in sideboards, like if there's like a blue-white control mirror that would want this, right? If they're just going to play like Sphinx of the Final Word instead.
Potentially, I mean this comes down a little bit sooner, but I don't know.
You want to protect with counter magic if that's true.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's possible we could see play. I get it.
Sure.
I get it. The next card is Hieroglyphic Illumination, and I don't want to talk about it for too long. It's pretty simple. 3 generic and a blue for an instant, draw 2 cards.
Inspiration.
Yeah, it's inspiration. It's Egyptian inspiration. It's hieroglyphics. But it has cycling for a blue. And,
so
I don't know if you noticed this, but blue is the cycling king, and this card really plays really well because early you can cycle it, and then if you like, especially in the control decks or even like the Drakehaven decks, like on turn 4, if there's pressure, you're cycling it. You're looking for answers. If there's not pressure, you're just drawing 2 cards, and that's just fine. So inspiration's always like close to playable, and adding cycling to it just means like, well, whatever, we just get rid of it if we don't need it. So
yeah, I think for any like deck that's not utilizing energy, this is going to be better than
Then Glimmer,
the
absolutely.
Glimmer of Genius. So Glimmer of Genius is still a card that I think we'll see plenty of play because there's still like a lot of energy.
And the scry is
synergies.
important. Like you get
Right.
more looks for sure.
Yeah. But I think the cycling for 1 on this is really nice.
Yeah, the decks with Glimmer, the play pattern is they always have to they desperately need to cast that card a lot of the times. Whereas this one is like, well, I could just cycle it, and I don't have to worry about like getting blown out on turn 4 or not being able to cast a spell to interact because I don't know if I'm going to hit my next land drop or something. So.
All right, let's talk about our second god, Kefnet.
Kefnet the Mindful. So it's 2 generic and a blue for a legendary creature god. It's a 5/5 flying indestructible. Can't attack or block unless you have 7 or more cards in hand. And it has an activated ability of 3 generic and a blue. Draw a card, and then you may return a land you control to its owner's hand. So we talked about this one a little bit when it was first spoiled. It can synergize if you have lands that have effects when they enter the battlefield. So
The desert that shoots people for 1, this is now a win condition.
It's about as slow as it gets, but yes, sure. This is a card. This might be another like potential out of the sideboard card, I think, because like I don't know. This one seems like it's the hardest to turn on out of all the gods, but at the same time, it's not. It's like if you don't do anything for the first couple of turns, like if you have the luxury of not having to do anything for the first couple of turns, then you'll still have a full grip when it comes time to attack with this. So, in 3 mana, 5/5 flying indestructible hits pretty hard. So, I don't know. Like I don't think this is the best god, but I think it could definitely see some play if everything lines up for it.
Yeah, I mean, like obviously this one it is fairly difficult to enable to be able to attack or block. I mean, having that clause in there is a bit rough. But I mean, if we're really talking about something that you'd want in a control mirror match, like Sphinx's Final Word obviously is great, but it comes down at 7. Like this comes down at 3. Like this, you can sneak this in under potentially counter magic. I mean,
And then it gets cast out.
yeah, I mean that is the other awkward thing. But I mean you can design a game around enabling this card and turning it on, and then like being able to ride the giant Birdman to victory. So
I like it. Right, the giant Birdman.
yeah.
I know. I like this card. I want it to be good, but I think I've got to see it. I don't want to work towards it. That's how I feel about this card. Like I don't want to put the work in.
Sure.
Show me that it's good.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I think it'll be Kefnet the Ignored.
Aw.
Aw, sorry, Mr. Birdman. Bird God. Jeez, disrespectful.
All right. Let's talk about taking some things.
So the next card is from Monty Python's Flying Circus.
Yes, correct. that is completely accurate.
Have you ever seen The Meaning of Life, the Monty Python movie? And like God actually like his hand comes down and smites somebody in that film, and like the soldier is like staring at it, and his sergeant literally goes, "Don't just stand there like you've never seen the hand of God before." That's what this is. It says yoink. Lake Claim is 5 generic blue for an enchantment aura. Enchant permanent, you control enchant a permanent. So this is Confiscate. And it has cycling for 2. Like, he was like, 7 mana Confiscate. Why do I care about that? Because it cycles for 2.
Yep.
Because you can put it in your deck and then just cycle it when you draw it early, but know that you have an out to like, this Planeswalker I don't have an answer for right now. Oh, it's mine now. So, and this has been such a Planeswalker heavy format, and now we see like Liliana's Death Majesty, and that some of these these Planeswalkers have some kind of scary ultimates. Like this is the kind of card that like is just perfect. So you cycle it early, especially like you cycle it early to put the Fear of God in them, right? Or just like, they might have more of these, right? And it's probably your only one. Like, well, who cares? Just playing one, right? But like, if not, then you draw it later, and it's super relevant. You know what I mean? Like you can just sit on it. So I know again, this feels like a really interesting use of cycling for me. Like, it's turn 2. I'm never going to get to 7 mana right now. We'll just cycle it away. Who cares? But draw it late in the game.
Yeah.
Now you got to stew.
This feels like a sweet one of.
Yes, absolutely.
Like some kind of control deck. I mean, I don't know if it's going to be like ubiquitous, but like I said, the cycling makes it like if this didn't have cycling, it would be unplayable. It would not be.
Oh no, not
It
even
would
close.
be a totally unplayable card. But yeah, cycling, like you said, it's like, oh, you draw it in your opening hand. Okay, well, I'm not gonna, cast this for a while. I can cycle this out and hit my land drops, whatever.
I do want to point out that this is definitely Kefnet in the art
Oh, yeah.
too. Why does he have a human hand? Like,
Oh, they all
I know,
do.
but like, it's so I just don't get it. Like,
I mean, even like the Avens in the set have like human bodies.
It's like-
and then
The
bird
snakes.
heads. Yeah,
The snakes have like
Kefnet
human.
is like Mr. Fantastic, and I don't like it.
it just is, man.
It's the fingernails that get me. Why does this bird have fingernails? Like, that's what I don't understand, man. Like, that is gonna haunt my dreams. Like birds
Well,
with fingernails.
Sorry, man. You just have to get a new perspective on it.
I hate you.
New perspectives is the next card we're going to be talking about. In case you couldn't tell,
So this is a card. So new
it
perspective.
certainly is.
New Perspectives is 5 generic and a blue enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, draw 3 cards. It's pretty good. And as long as you have 7 or more cards in hand, you may pay 0 rather than pay cycling costs. So when this card was first spoiled, people pointed out that discarding the card is part of the cycling cost. It turns out you still have to discard the card when you
You
when
do
you
still
pay
have to
0.
discard the card, but
Yeah.
Matt Tabak got very angry when people
Yeah.
questioned him about that. So,
Um,
oops.
But yeah, you pay 0 rather than paying any other cost to cycling other than discarding. So that goes for any of these single mana cyclers, 2 mana,
Whatever mana cyclers.
anything like even old cyclic cards like Street Wraith. You don't have to pay the life; you can just pay 0 instead.
There you go. They just broke. They found a way to make that card worse. Actually, technically.
Yeah, that would be worse, I guess, in certain decks.
But you even have like the new Croson Tusker that's in this set.
Yeah.
That can cycle for free and get lands off of it too. Which
Yeah,
is kind of
like
sick.
you cycle your Renewed Faith, you still gain the 2 life. And
Yeah.
you cycle it for 0.
Oh, you may. You don't have to.
You may, yeah. It's, the option is there. Man, I think there could potentially be a combo deck with this because this is a lot like Fluctuator, and the fact that it lets you use all your cycling cards for free. In a lot of ways, it's actually better than Fluctuator because it lets you do things have more than. Well, Fluctuator just reduced the cost by 2, so it only worked for just straight up 2 mana cycling. This works for any kind of cycling. I know, obviously, like having to have 7 cards in hand is to make it work is a bit of a drawback, but I think it'd be way too good if it didn't have that. And even if you're not like going off, just like drawing 3 cards is fine. I mean, it is a 6 mana sorcery speed draw 3, but it's not terrible. And I think it's potentially. It's definitely a card to keep an eye on because, like, being able to load up your deck with cyclers and just being able to turbo through your deck it's pretty powerful.
Yeah, and I think there's a couple cards. There's the black card we'll talk about when we get to black, which is the Shadow of the Grave, which can return all the cards you've cycled.
Yeah.
And there's a blue card, which I don't have on our list because like it's not great, but there's the Vizier of Tumbling Sands that when you cycle it, you get to untap a permanent.
Yes.
So there is potential to go off the turn you cast New Perspectives, because if you have a couple of those in your hand, you could cycle and untap your lands.
Right.
And then like if you have the green creature we talked about, the Croson Tusker, you can also find more lands to put them into play, and you can build you can build a turn where you go through your whole deck, you win in some way.
Yeah. The payoff is
You win by going, I did it.
yeah. The payoff.
You concede? No?
payoff isn't-
Okay, I die.
It's not quite clear to us yet what exactly the payoff is, but it's kind of like in Ad Nauseam in Modern, for example. It's like when you could draw your whole deck, you could probably figure out.
Yeah,
a way.
you could find that.
Yeah.
I'm going to keep making this Jurassic Park reference. New
Nature-
Perspectives will find a way. So, I skipped all the way down to the Vizier. Let me go back. Next up is Sphinx's Rev.
Oh, well, not quite.
I mean,
Not quite. It's better in some ways, though.
yes and no. So we have Pool from Tomorrow, which is like Sands to the Hourglass. These are the days of our lives.
These are days of our lives. Yes, correct.
That's what the art looks like. Blue X. For an instant, draw X cards, then discard a card. So we have like a better Stroke of Genius in a lot of ways, right? Stroke of Genius was blue and 2 generic and X. So
Well, stroke was used to kill your opponent.
it was used to kill your opponent. But
I'm just
saying.
But
or like I think this is maybe better than like Blue Sun Zenith, which is like the last time we really saw this effect.
could also kill your opponent. But
That wasn't the Sphinx's Rev. You're not wrong. Also, I get it. Okay, I get it. We're not using it to kill our opponent. I'm aware. We have
not directly anyway.
we have Walking Ballista for that. We have infinite mana now.
That's true.
But I think this card is going to get if we have these blue decks that want to play draw go, then they tend to need to have a way to reload their hands. And this is the card that does it. The discard's a little awkward because it's not as effective as like on like 4, right? Because then you're only getting like 1 card out of it, which is a little awkward. So it scales a little awkwardly in the early game, like the turns 3, 4, 5. But after that, it starts getting pretty viable, and anything above that, like you're really happy just to draw all the cards because you're going to have like a land or something extra to pitch. It also, I'm going to say it, works at Drakehaven because you can leave mana up and discard and get a Drake too. So
yeah.
But I think this card's just like very clearly like good.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, there are just so many cards that you actively just like want to discard anyway. Like if you're playing a deck with like Haunted Dead or whatever, you're like, okay, well, or like Prized Amalgam. You're
Right.
like, okay, I'll draw some cards to discard this Prized Amalgam. Sure. Like these are cards you didn't want in your hand anyway.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, it's somewhat comparable to Sphinx's Revelation, and like that might be. I don't think that's hyperbole, really. I mean, I think they both have their advantages and disadvantages if you kind of compare them next to each other. Like Sphinx's Rev gaining you the life could obviously get you out of a lot of tight spots, but this one being 1 less mana to turn on makes it better like earlier in the game. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. This is actually like a surprising card to me that they printed this.
Yeah, it just feels like it's been a while. Blue got all these toys, and I don't know what to do with them.
I know, right?
Yeah, like the first time you see somebody like cast this for like 6, you're just gonna be like, oh, well,
That's the thing.
Oh,
That
yeah, I
game-
forgot Blue does
that
that.
game's probably over. Yeah. So, we talked about blue-white control. Maybe, much like Sphinx's Rev was back in the day of like that was kind of like Sphinx's Rev was your win condition, even though it obviously didn't win you the game, but you just drew so many cards that you just buried them in card advantage. You may see Pull from Tomorrow play that role in standard.
Yeah, that's fair.
Awesome. So let's talk about the Vizier of Many Faces.
Of the Many-Faced God.
Yeah.
Nice.
The Vizier Many Faces, 2 generic blue for a Shapeshifter Cleric. It's a 0/0, and you may have it enter the battlefield as a copy of any creature on the battlefield, except if Vizier of Many Faces was embalmed. Hint, hint. The token has no mana cost. It's white, and it's a zombie in addition to its other types. And it has embalm, in case you didn't guess.
I couldn't read ahead, apparently.
And the embalm is 3 generic blue. So this is essentially a clone that has embalm. I don't know if this card would be playable. 4 mana clones. I think, like you mentioned, was the last week, Mike.
Yeah.
We had the one that could copy any permanent, and that card didn't see any play. And that card could it could copy planeswalkers and stuff like that.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
This I don't have high hopes for, but it's certainly pretty cool.
I think like the reason I included it on here is just because Embalm makes it feel so close. You can inadvertently discard it, to anything. And clone effects, they're not what they used to be, especially the fact that it doesn't kill legends anymore. You know what I mean? Makes it, less. I think before you had some utility. You know what I mean? Like, think back to like when we had Geist of St. Traft running around in Standard, and you could you could get rid of it. You know what I mean? You could.
Yeah, back when the legend rule worked that way.
Yeah. Which for some of you listening, don't worry about it. Legend rule doesn't work that way anymore. But I do think there's enough powerful effects in the format. Like think about like blue decks, like especially that with all the Gear Hulks running around, where like this doesn't feel bad if you're just like, oh well, that's a cool Gear Hulk you have. I'm gonna make one too. and then oh well, you killed it. That's cool. I'm gonna embalm it and make another one. So I think there's enough powerful creatures, and that's what really always dictates clones. Like if there are really powerful creatures, then clones can be good. So maybe we'll see no play. It's very possible it sees no play, but I think embalm makes it close.
Fair enough.
Last blue card.
Commit to Memory.
Yeah, don't forget.
Yeah.
Okay, Commit to Memory is another Aftermath card, so one of our split cards. Commit says is an instant for 3 generic and a blue that says put target spell or non-land permanent into its owner's library second from the top. And then Memory is an aftermath card sorcery that costs 4 generic blue and says each player shuffles his or her hand and graveyard into his or her library, then draw 7 cards. So we have like a weird sort of like time twister on the other side. This card's actually pretty good. Commit is an interesting spell because it can take care of any permanent, a non-land permanent. And I say take care of it like, oh, we'll get to draw it later. It's like, yeah, but like that tempo gain can be pretty good for a deck that just needs to draw cards, or might in fact be playing like, the draw spell we just talked about, you know what I mean, where it just needs some time. But the really cool thing about this card is that the way that it works, Gearhulk can cast Memory. And that is really, like, granted you're giving your opponent 7 cards, but you cast your Gearhulk end of turn, and then you get to cast Memory, and then you get to untap with your 7-card hand. And that's going to feel really strong in a lot of games.
If you've ever cast Time Spiral, now it's not as good as Time Spiral because you can't do you can't gain mana off of it like you could with Time Spiral. However, like you said, being the first one to be able to use your new 7 cards is pretty good.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we had the one. What was the last Time Twister like card? It was like you ended your turn after you cast it. So
it was literally was the same mana cost too, and I can't remember what it's called.
Yeah, it was whatever. Yeah, the one that did, it was a Time Twister, but you ended your turn.
Days and Doing.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, that was a card that like people thought would be pretty good.
I mean, it's all play. There was that blue deck running around for a while, the Jace's Sanctum deck or whatever. That was a thing, and it's all play.
It was fringe. It was fringe.
There was Affinity decks that ran it for a little while too in Modern. So, I mean,
this feels. I mean, it's definitely worse if you don't have the Gearhulk interaction, but like you're probably going to be playing Gearhulk in your deck if you're playing this.
Yes,
you know what I mean. And Commit is a decent enough spell on its own. And 4 mana is kind of a lot for that effect, but it's not ridiculous. You would play that.
You would play that to interact with the kind of permanents that like maybe you didn't have the counter spell the turn for like a planeswalker, and now you need to cast this so you could give yourself time to counter it, like the old bounce the creature so you can counter it on the way back down play. Yeah, I think this card is pretty good, and will be sort of, I guess, the interaction with Gearhulk I think really seals it for me thinking it's going to see play.
And Gearhulk really works with any of these split cards that have at least one side as an instant. So just something to keep in mind. So when you're looking at any of the cards, really, it's always an interaction that could come up.
Yeah, and that's it for blue. What do we think about blue? I mean, obviously we're pretty high on it. I think blue, everyone kind of said that blue got its groove back. It found someone, and it really feels restored.
Aw, that's so nice.
It's a heartwarming story.
I think blue. I think blue gained a lot of tools and may make a lot of players happy who have sort of been had those blues.
Oh, I see. You're very clever. You're very clever.
You get some playable counter spells. You get a lot of 1-mana cyclers.
You get some win conditions. You get some draw spells.
Yeah, you get some draw spells. You get a potential combo. Well, 2 potential combo enablers. You get As Foretold and New Perspectives.
Yeah.
I think blue got some good stuff in this set. So
yeah, fair enough. That's it. That's it for blue. Let's move on to the next color. All right, black is going to be our next color. And we're going to start off with the Archfiend of Ifnir, which sounds like you're saying something like, and then you played it back. You played it back backwards. Yeah, or you're in a Missy Elliott video.
Is that worth it? Let me work it.
All right,
Archdemon. Oh, Archfiend. Excuse me.
Archfiend of Ifnir is 3 generic black for a 5/4 flying demon. Whenever you cycle or discard another card, put a -1/-1 counter on each creature your opponents control. Then it itself has cycling for 2. So this, I think this is a legit, another payoff card in a cycling-centric deck. The body, 5/4 flying for 5 is fine, but the ability, of being able to wipe out your opponent's board is really powerful. And the fact that it just triggers on discarding cards as well can let you do some disgusting things. So I think this is a card that could definitely see some standard play. Also, I think will definitely show up in the Living End deck in Modern.
Yeah, I talked about that a little bit before, and I agree with you on that.
So,
yeah, that's what I have to say with the card. Like, I think like not every deck will want this at all. Like compared to like the Sphinx, this is not nearly as efficient as a cycler, but like the deck that like has any interaction with this, yeah, it's pretty good. So.
Yeah, and it's pretty good to give like all your opponents Drakes -1 as well.
This is true.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, like if you expect Drakehaven to be as good as Mike thinks it's going to be,
Hey, even if it's only that good in my mind,
yeah,
that's all I need.
I mean, this is a good card. Like if you're playing a blue-black centric version of that, I mean, this is a good card to kind of trump the mirror by giving your like Morgan said, you give your opponent's Drakes -1 and maybe wiping them out.
Yeah.
So.
He also looks so curious. The way he's like, the way his neck's all cocked, like he's got this huge neck. He's like, huh?
What?
You guys call me? You
It's
cycling?
like, could be a cat that heard something.
All right.
Huh? All right. The next one I want to talk about here is Bone Picker.
Yeah.
Bone Picker.
It's got a bone to pick with you.
I got it.
This card is sweet.
This is 3 generic and a
You
black.
would think this card's sweet,
Yeah, I know.
Dave.
Absolutely.
For a 3/2 flyer with Death Touch. So it's like, why are we talking about 4 mana 3/2s? Like, yay, limited. Oh, wait. Bone Picker costs 3 less to cast if a creature died this turn. So, if something died...
Oh, so it's a 1 mana 3/2 flyer?
Yeah, that's a lot more exciting.
Oh, so is that touch?
Yeah, I wonder why Dave likes it now.
That's so weird.
1 mana 3/2 flyers. I think Dave has an affinity for
That you
those.
you have to do work to make it
Correct.
Make it,
Accurate.
Just like you did for the other one. Isn't that weird?
Yeah.
I think like we've sort of kicked around this idea that there might be another aristocrat style deck in the format, and this card interacts really, really positively with things like Eldrazi Scions. One list I've seen with this involved like Walking Ballistas and like Cryptolith, right? And like it went like turn 1, like play a Ballista for 0 to cast this, and then by turn 3 it was Descended Mind. It could cast Descended Mindbender.
Yeah.
I'm just saying like that. That's kind of scary.
I guess that's the thing you could do. It doesn't seem like particularly good.
Have you ever been Descended Mindbender?
Actually, no. But
Yeah, well then, yeah.
Well,
you
I'm just saying, like
you don't know, man.
like throwing away a Walking Ballista on turn 1 to like cast.
Oh
this,
no,
that's like,
I agree. That's like
don't
not
know.
the optimal play.
Yeah.
But I do think there's enough ways that you can like the easiest way for those aristocrats decks to get ahead, especially using like if you want to use right and you want to use what's the werewolf? I can't think. Duskwatch Recruiter. There are multiple ways that you can cast this. Cast a spell and this in the same turn, and that feels really, really good. Like okay, like I'll cast. Turn 4, I can cast. What's the 2/3? Man, I'm just not getting the names.
Oh, Catacomb Sifter?
There, cast Sifter, and then you can sack to Scry, and then you can play this. You know what I mean? And that feels pretty good.
And it's also important to note that it doesn't have to be your creature that died.
Yeah.
Also true.
Just a creature. So, who cares?
So you
Fatal
can-
Push someone, then cast this.
Also fun.
Turn 2. That's acceptable.
That play already happened in my cube.
Yeah,
I
I
proxied up
know.
some Amonkhet cards, and it was like, oh, yeah. Like, I have a sacrifice theme in my cube, so it kind of fits into that. But also, you could just, you can just Doom Blade your opponent's creature and then play a 1 mana 3/2. It's pretty good.
Perfectly acceptable.
Yeah, so I think this card is like deceptively like good, like
Yeah.
for sure.
All right. Next up, we have our third god, Bantu, the Glorified.
All right, Bantu the Glorified. 2 generic and a black for a legendary creature god. It's a 4/6 menace indestructible. Can't attack or block unless a creature died under your control this turn. And it has the activated ability of 1 and a black, sacrifice another creature, scry 1, and then each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. So unlike Bone Picker, this does have to have one of your own creatures die in order to turn it
Correct.
on. However, has this neat little ability tacked onto it that lets you do that whenever you want.
Yeah, pretty handy.
No, I have said that I'm not as high on this one as you guys might be, just because I think sacrificing your board position can be a little dicey sometimes, though this does seem like one of the easier gods to turn on if you build your deck in that way.
Yeah.
So, I think the the cards are there in the format in standard where you could definitely build around this and make it pretty effective.
Yeah, that's where I'm at with it. Like, I was definitely high on it. I'm pretty high on it. This one requires definitely that build around, but yeah, the payoff feels real. And even like a 3-mana 4/6 with Menace, like once it starts attacking, like it's hard to block, and then like you can't block it profitably. Like you have to double block it, and that's not good for you because of indestructible. And then if not, then you're just taking 4, and possibly 5 if you activated the ability. And it's one of those cards that like I feel like it can slowly start to pick away at you to the point where you're like, oh no, like I'm sort of backed against the wall. Yes, it requires you sacrificing board position, but I still think we have enough cards that sort of allow you to play that game. So
I think so too. I mean, you could even try to make a deck around you have Hidden Stockpile as a card that's in this format, and if you want a way to always have something that you can just throw away,
oh man, that's really
I like that.
I really like that.
I mean, that's not an original thought. I didn't think about my own. I've seen it thrown around, but I mean, that's one way you could go with this. But I think Bonzu has potential. I wouldn't count it out, but I mean, it is one of those. It is like the god that's like, oh well, you really have to build around it. It's not just something that is just naturally good within its color, regardless of where you put it. So that is its downside, but could create to some innovative deck building.
Yeah, I think that in itself would make it see less play than it otherwise normally would.
Sure.
Because you do have to build around it. You can't just I think actually the last 2 gods that we're going to talk about are probably the best ones, just because they are just good you don't have to build around them. They're just good on their own.
Exactly. So. I wouldn't disagree with you on that point at all. So next up we have Dispossess.
So I just realized that the art for Dispossess definitely has the Archfiend on it. And he still looks all curious. Look at him. He's like,
oh, what's this thing you have? Or had, I guess, because I took it from you.
Dispossess, I just want to hit on quickly, is a black and 2 generic for a sorcery. It says choose an artifact, card name, search target opponent's graveyard, hand the library for all copies of that card, and then exile them. So this is an extraction effect for artifacts, which is hilarious because we have Lost Legacy, which specifically can't hit artifacts. And now,
one that only hits artifacts.
Yeah, so this is probably just a garbage card that will never see play. But if for some reason, Aetherworks Marvel's really ripping it up, you can go after it.
Yeah, and you're playing a deck that doesn't have any access to any sort of removal, which would be mono black. So
right.
you have a way to answer it. Congratulations.
Now I will say, if there's these blue-white decks that have essentially just Gear Hulks as a win condition, this could be kind of scary. Out of the sideboard it was oh, Dispossess, Torrential Gear Hulk, and it's
see?
Oh, I can't win the game.
That's why you need to board in those 5/3 Sphinxes.
But yeah, this card.
You're gonna need the Lost Legacy for those ones.
But yeah, this card isn't exciting, but it does its job, I guess. So
yeah. All right. I think now we're kind of going to dive into a whole chunk of zombie cards.
A whole bunch of mummies.
We're gonna take off a piece of that zombie card. And we've got Dread Reveler,
Dread Wanderer,
Festering Mummy, Liliana's Mastery, Plague Belcher, as being Lure of the Accursed, which is probably one of the more important ones now that I obviously scan over. But I think we have these this whole block of zombie cards that kind of lend themselves to being hey, we're a little bit pushed. Some of us have caveats. And we are trying to build somewhat of an aggressive strategy based on what we can see. We start with Dread Wanderer, and this is a 2/1 for 1 that comes into play tapped, and then you can pay 3 and return it to the battlefield. But you only activate it if you have 1 or less. Only if you get to cast a sorcery and you have 1 or fewer cards in hand. So right. It's sort of the worst. Version of these type of return from the battlefield cards. This isn't a grave crawler all the time, but upside can block. That's something.
It can block. That's why it comes back tapped and can only be used as a sorcery. But I will say
they made sure.
Gravecrawler didn't have prized amalgams in the format.
Very true.
So I think if that had happened, that would be you wouldn't have seen it working like that.
Yeah,
so.
And you have Festering Mummy, which is just a straight upgrade from Festering Goblin. Since the -1/-1 sticks around. It's definitely on the low end of the cards that we're talking about, but worth mentioning.
If you want to play more aggressive, then you have a lot of 1-drops, which is nice.
We have Liliana's Mastery, which is paired with Lord of the Accursed, are two Lord effects. So they give all your mummy or zombies, excuse me, +1/+1, and Mastery makes 2 zombies as it comes in.
Yeah, so it's 6 power worth of creatures for 5 mana plus doing whatever to your board. That card is probably questionable, but I think it's close.
Yeah, and Lord of the Accursed is a 3 mana. So black and 2 generic for a 2/3, and it gives all your other zombies +1/+1, and can you can tap it and pay 1 generic and a black and give all of your zombies. I keep wanting to say mummies. All your zombies.
Well, because I keep saying mummy.
Yeah, all your zombies menace until end of turn, which is pretty annoying. To be perfectly honest. It's definitely something that you see the machinations, you see it kind of starting to come through. And lastly, I think I actually don't think goes into this zombie deck that we're trying to create, which is Plague Belcher, which is a 3 mana, is a 2 generic and a black for a 5/4 menace zombie beast. It says when it enters the battlefield, you put 2 -1/-1 counters on target creature you control. And it says whenever another zombie you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life. And I think as it exists, it is fairly difficult to enable effectively on your board, in all honesty.
What?
Having played the actual deck.
I can't disagree with you more.
So so if you put it on yourself, it's a 3/2 menace.
You don't put it on itself. Like you're playing the 2/1 that comes back for 1 that you can just kill that off, or you play your Crypt Breaker on turn 1, and you make a zombie token on turn 3, which occurs
Sure.
with this.
But having actually tried to play with it, it just doesn't always work out.
Well, it's never always going to work out, but I feel like you want this card in your zombie deck because you could even kill your Scrap Heap Scrounger on turn 2. You played on turn 2 that you just comes back as well.
But are you actually playing Scrounger in?
I think you're definitely playing Scrounger in that deck.
I don't know.
That card is just obscene in that deck. It's a 3 power 2-drop that gets to come back.
Sure, potentially.
No, it definitely does come back. It's not
but then I don't know.
I think that card. I think it's easier than you're giving credit to make Plague Belcher an actual 5/4 with menace on turn 3.
So the deck that I have seen this in that actually makes it very effectively as a 5/4 for turn 3 is the Black Green Sacrifice deck.
Well, that makes sense. You can play Channeler Initiate, which actively may want more counters on it, and that's fine. I still think this goes into the zombie deck as well. I think it definitely does.
So this card does a couple things. So you can target your own creature and then sacrifice as something else, like Bantu, for example. And then it still comes in as a 5/4. You can also kill one of your own creatures and then enable Revolt for your Fatal Pushes, which is pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
I think this card is great. Obviously, it does take a little bit of work to make it great. I do agree with Morgan a little bit, but I don't think it takes too much.
And I think it's also why, I mentioned, the mummy, the festering mummy, which you just want a lot of 1-drops and 2-drops to lead you into this card. And then so even if it's festering mummy, and then you go into this card, you kill the mummy, you get to put a -1 counter on your opponent's creature, which may kill a creature, and you also get a trigger off of this, and then you have a 5/4. So with menace, which makes it on turn 3 can actively make it seem unblockable.
And then having the pseudo Blood Artist ability.
Yeah,
so if you are playing
relevant.
some kind of sacrifice outlet, you can just get them low enough to where you're just okay, I'll sack my board, make you lose however much life.
And not just that, with cards Radiant Flames and the Sweltering Suns, and even Fumigate, which gains them life, but if your zombie deck's a swarm deck, then this is a really nice payoff too. So
yeah. So I don't know. I don't know if there's enough things actually out there to make it the swarm deck, which is kind of what I'm leaning towards at this point in time. The way that they want you to lean towards building it doesn't really lend itself to doing that. There's no way, in my opinion, there's no way to get a plentiful amount of zombies on the board to really make that strategy viable. But maybe I'm just building wrong. But from what I was experiencing, it just felt like you were trading off too many things.
I get that, but I'm just trying to go through my head. If you have 4 Crypt Breakers, 4 of the 2/1s, 4 Festering Mummies, and then like obviously Scrappy Scrounger's not a zombie, but 4 of those, 4 Relentless Dead. You know what I mean? And then you have, I'd have to go back and look at other 2 drops, but then you have, Plague Belcher, you have the Colossus, the 3 mana guy that makes zombies whenever you cast another zombie spell, and obviously the Lord. Like, that feels like a lot of creatures between 1, 2, and 3 that feels swarmy. Now, again, you may be right. Maybe this is going to be a ton of Magma Sprays running around, but if that's true, then I don't think any version of the zombie deck exists.
Yeah, but I mean, it always just feels like you're not able, like, it's hard to balance all of that. Like, you play all those cards, but then, like, how much mana do you actually need to play? What other spells are you playing? It's like
that argument holds no water. That's every deck. Every deck has
I understand that,
argument.
but I mean, like, you can't play all the cards that we're like throwing out there.
All the cards I just threw out there, you actively could just play in the deck.
As 4-ups?
Probably not.
Yeah, so you have to like figure out what.
But I'm not suggesting that. Like, I think you're being very coy in your argument about this. You're like, oh well, yeah, you mentioned some good cards. You can't play all of them, so obviously it's not a deck. Like, that doesn't.
I'm not saying it's not a deck. I'm just saying, like, you have to be able to like consistently get paid off for these cards. I'm saying, like,
Sure.
that I don't think you can consistently do that with the cards that are available to you.
Okay, I think you're wrong.
I mean, we'll have to see in the format. I mean, I'm not
going to play the deck, so I don't care.
Yeah, like, I don't think the zombies deck is like the aggressive deck that I'm leaning towards in the first place. Like, I think there's much better aggressive options, which we'll talk about further on.
It's certainly possible, but I will say I think like cards like Relentless Dead and Diagraph Colossus, which have seen, like, Relentless Dead has doubled in price in the last couple of days. It's back up to $10. Like,
it always does that, though.
Well, it always does that, but I mean, it feels a lot closer now. You know what I mean?
Sure. I'm not saying they didn't push these cards, but it's just like you still have to like figure out a good configuration for them, which I think is difficult.
Okay. I understand it's hard. Crybaby. All right. Let's go back off zombies then for a second. Go back to Faith of the Devoted, which is the other card I alluded to earlier. Faith of the Devoted is a black and 2 colors for an enchantment that has the same, whenever you cycle or discard a card, you may pay 1. If you do, each opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. So this one is not as good. Like, the lack of board presence really makes this card, like, it's a tougher pill to swallow, tapping out like on turn 3 for this card when you know that you can't just like recover on board the next turn, right? I will say though, when Dave, you mentioned like the new perspectives combo deck.
Yeah, this
is the card
like
that feels like it could be the payoff. Where if you get to untap and you have 7 cards in hand, like, your opponent, it just dies. You're just like, oh, okay, cool. Because like then you have the cyclers who get to untap lands, and the cyclers who get to put lands into play, and you could very easily just like 20 your opponent the turn after you untap. So that I think was why I want to mention this card, because I think that if there's a combo deck, that this might be it with new perspectives.
Yep. And the other card, Shadow of the Grave.
Yeah, that's also true.
Hey, we're coming up on that.
Okay.
Hold your horses.
All right.
Let's talk about.
Dave has horses. Don't bring those to my house.
Let's talk about some hearts, some heartless, some Kingdom Hearts imagery going on here.
Lay bare the heart is definitely something that has been said in Kingdom Hearts. Like,
yeah, you're just gonna hear the
Sora, lay bare your heart.
You're just gonna hear like the Utada Hikari song when you first see this card. You're just gonna be like, "When you walk away."
I've been playing a lot of Kingdom Hearts the last few weeks, so I'm all in.
All right, so lay bare the heart.
I want to pause for a second. I didn't even paid attention to this art. That's definitely a keyhole in that person's chest.
No, they're just like, hey,
this is definitely a Kingdom Hearts card.
Kingdom Hearts.
Oh, okay.
Let's crib their style. Cool.
So he's not quite getting Kali Mod by this by this hand that's
No,
like
he's
off,
turning into a
off
heartless.
camera.
That's true.
All right. So lay bare the heart. 1 in a black sorcery. Target opponent reveals his or her hand. You choose a non-legendary, non-land card from it. That player discards that card. So unlike what's the one we have now?
Harsh Scrutiny.
No.
Oh,
the one from Battle.
Transgress the Mind.
Yes.
Yeah, unlike Transgress the Mind, this doesn't have a restriction on like what mana cost you can get. Though it is really awkward that like you can't take a Heart of Kieran with this.
What is the point
I think
of this?
the best joke I saw of this was like you lay bare the heart, so your opponent shows you the Heart of Kieran that they're going to kill you with. 'Cause you can't take it because it's a legend. I don't think as long as Transgress is in the format, I think that's probably just going to be a better card to play
it
in
seems like
in this slot.
Because Exile is super important too.
Yeah, Exiles. You know,
What is I don't understand the point of this card. Like, it's an option. It hits more maybe spells that you want to care about early, but like it's so frustrating. Like,
Hey,
what?
now you do have to note that this card was developed like when they didn't think Transgress the Mind was also still going to be in the format, so maybe that's why, like, comparatively, it looks so bad.
That's fair. I'm just saying more why as to like the legendary clause. Like, I actively want to know what the point of that clause was.
they can't take gods, man.
Yeah,
Okay,
that's
maybe,
honestly that's probably it.
That's the answer I want. I
It
guess.
is odd because they have a bunch of cards in this set that answer the gods, which is good. It's good that they did that. It's like, hey, for once, they're printing answers in the same set. But on the other side, it's like this one seems specifically made to not answer the gods, which is weird. But anyway,
Oh man, I got a sweet one.
Yeah.
I get Liliana, Death's Majesty. So this is our second Planeswalker we're talking about. This is black and through generic for a 5 loyalty Liliana Planeswalker. It has a +1. Create a 2/2 black zombie creature token and put the top 2 cards of your library into your graveyard. -3. Return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. That creature is a black zombie in addition to its other colors and types. -7. Destroy all non-zombie creatures. So not an ultimate that like wins the game specifically, but powerful nonetheless. The fact that it goes to 6 loyalty the first turn it comes in is pretty great, and that -3 is powerful.
Yeah,
I can't find anything to not like about this card.
it's literally Rise from the Grave, which is a card that is in Standard right now.
Is it really?
Yes.
Yeah, Rise from the Grave isn't standard. This does have the clause that it has to be your graveyard.
Right.
I think Rise from the Grave still had to be your graveyard, didn't it? Am I
It,
crazy?
I think it was any. I think it
It's
was
any
Okay,
graveyard.
fair enough.
But in any case, like you're gonna do it in your own graveyard most of the time anyway. But like this one, it's like a Rise from the Grave, but then you still have a Planeswalker in play with 2 loyalty. Or you could like play it, tick it up, and then just have 2 Rise from the Graves in a row.
Yeah, I didn't realize that card was in
Yeah.
standard.
Also something that triggers prized amalgams.
Also
if you
true.
Return any other creature. Man, yeah, this card is super good.
Yeah, it protects itself by having great loyalty and making tokens. And I've seen a lot of people. I've literally like on the deep web
on the deep web.
have seen this phrase typed out. Is Solar Flare back? Which if you don't remember what Solar Flare was, there was a Solar Flare deck all the way back in, was it Time Spiral
There's
block?
a Time Spiral, original Ravnica.
Yes.
Because you had Signets and
Yeah, you had Angel
Yeah.
of Despair, right? That's
Angel of Despair.
Was it Dread Return?
You used Zombify. actually.
Zombify, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was like, so we tried to discard an early Angel of Despair and then bring it back. And then we had it in a Shroud block because we had Liliana the Veil and like Sun Titan and Albera Rights. So it would try to do that. Which that deck was kind of popular for a minute, but didn't really go to the heights that people thought it would. But once again, you have a Liliana that can tick down and bring something big back. We have a lot of things in the format that, again, cycle, like you mentioned the Sphinx already, or ways to discard those effects. And, having, this is a very playable resurrection spell. Like, outside of it just being a planeswalker, like, it's just very playable, like, bring a guy back, and you can really cheat on mana that way. So, it's kind of interesting.
I think a cool interaction that you might end up seeing in Standard is this returning an Archfiend of Ifnir, because you can play this, tick up, next turn return an Archfiend, and then have all your mana to use for cycling or discarding something else. So you can get it into play, and then be able to use its ability potentially to wipe out your opponent's board. So, yeah, I mean, this... yeah, I don't know. I mean, this is going to be a really good card in Standard, and I guess it's competing with Obnixilis. I guess they're doing 2 different things, which is good.
No, yeah,
I guess
they
you
are.
want that.
They do feel very different, but this does, to me, feel better than Obnixilis.
Yeah, this one is like a little bit more of a build around. Like you obviously want creatures.
Yeah,
in your
you
deck,
want your graveyard to be like something you want to interact with. Because
Right.
Obnixilis doesn't really care; it just draws you cards. But
Yeah.
and destroying a creature is important. But I don't know. I gotta say too, I mentioned this I think offcast. But man, I love the art on this.
Yeah,
It's really good. Yeah.
Like it's so Liliana. Like she getting fanned by a mummy, eating fruit off a mummy's head. hanging out in the shade on the Egypt plane. Like,
She's just like, yeah, what up? Pose. It's great.
All right.
I think this is probably the best planeswalker. You guys think?
in this,
We haven't talked about Nissa yet.
Yeah, I think it is though.
Yeah.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like the one that, in a vacuum, I like the most. I don't know. It might have somewhat of a hard time finding a home potentially. Just for the sheer fact that we don't really know how standard is going to shake out, and if standard just remains how it is, like there isn't like a deck you put it in right now. But it does have the downside of being like 5 mana. That is a downside.
Yeah. It is a downside, but it definitely it comes with a high enough loyalty and the ability to protect yourself. That
I agree.
I think it's perfectly fine.
I agree. I just think like mainstream wise, like black isn't like the strongest color right now, comparatively to what you could be like doing with it. So,
Sure.
but I have hope for it. Like it's powerful enough to force its way into something, or have something like be made around it,
Right.
or at least be made to include it. Not necessarily around it, but Anyway. Let's talk about this this nest here. This. Hey, you guys remember the Mummy with Brendan Fraser?
Hey, we're back.
Call back. Yeah, this is like from that movie.
Nest of Scarabs.
Yeah.
All right, so 2 generic and a black enchantment. Whenever you put 1 or more -1/-1 counters on a creature, create that many 1/1 black insect creature tokens.
Yeah. So clearly, the guy in this art definitely read that book and summoned that mummy back.
Oh,
This reminds me of the Mummy ride from Universal,
Yeah.
which is the best ride in the park. I need you to understand.
Yes.
Ride is great,
Very much so.
but the room fills up with scarabs.
Yeah. Oh
And-
yeah. I get that. I do remember that part.
Then you
yes.
cry for a little bit.
Yeah.
So I think this card got spoiled fairly early, and I think it was like we thought this would be a good engine card. How do you feel about it now that we have the whole set?
I still don't know. It's pretty sweet with the Archfiend of Ifnir, though.
That is definitely
Like,
true.
you just activate it, and then you just however many creatures your opponent has, that's how many that's how many 1/1s you get. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's still. I think you'd want a reason, or I guess you'd want to put the 1/1s to use somehow, like with the sacrifice effect, I think, or something like that. But it's pretty good. It just doesn't do anything on its own, which is always
Yeah,
You know.
that is.
There's always the death knell.
So.
yeah.
But I think it's also a card that could stand, much like the zombies we talked about, could stand to get better with obviously Hour of Devastation, because this I think -1/-1 counters are going to remain sort of a thing throughout the block. So you might see it benefit because it does seem like outside of some of the creatures that put -1/-1 counters on themselves and the demon, they're not enough interaction. But
Right. But
It feels like this is like one decent like removal spell away from being like
Right.
enabled. Or it's just like, oh well, I get to cast this, and then I get to like kill your creature effectively, like efficiently, and then I get to get scarabs.
yeah, I think this will end up being like more of a limited card. Though, like if Block Constructed was still a thing, it probably would be good there.
Probably
yeah,
true.
maybe.
But yeah, I don't think it's gonna be quite good enough as is. But like you said, it might get some help in the next set.
Yeah, maybe.
enough.
We'll keep an eye on it. All right. To keep on Scarab theme, we're going to talk about them eating now.
Scarab Feast. This is a single black for an instant. It says exile up to 3 target cards from a single graveyard and has cycling for a black. So this is pretty straightforward, but we've been begging for some sort of graveyard interaction. And while this isn't the best thing ever, this is actively a rare in Urza's Destiny called Rapid
Yeah,
Decay.
it
Rapid
also
Decay.
costs 2. Yeah,
But being able to exile specific targeted things, like hey, if they're going to tick down their Liliana, you can cast this in response, and that feels pretty good. If they're doing Haunted Dead, Prized Amalgam shenanigans, this can do that. If they have a bunch of Scrap Heap Scroungers, you can get rid of those. And again, this goes back to what we talked about within White, where this is a sideboard effect, but it's really easy to play in the main deck, especially if you're playing a deck that is already playing some cycling cards, playing the Archfiend maybe. Like, don't be surprised to done get got.
yeah. This card is great. Again, just more answer cards that were needed in the format, and I think you'll see a fair amount of play. Like you said, in main decks as well as sideboard. So
Yeah, this is one of those examples where it's like also still has 1 mana cycling, still very relevant. So potentially main deckable. So be wary of that. It could happen, and you could get blown out, and it'd feel real bad. You'd be a real sad person.
no, I expect this is going to be a card that you're going to like hope to cycle most of the time, but
Just
sometimes sometimes
it'll
you'll
be
get them.
really good.
Yeah, sometimes you'll just get them. All right,
Shadow of the Grave.
Shadow of the Grave. So
Wasn't that a